Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Tuesday Talks at the Atwood. My name is Kevin Wright. I'm the Executive Director here at the Atwood Museum, and we're so happy that you could attend this evening's wonderful lecture. We have a great turnout for this evening. Before we get started, I want to do a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, our next lecture will be March 9th. Again, it's a Tuesday evening from 5 to 6. We'll be with our speaker, Ted Keown. He'll be talking about the Chatham coastline. So please mark your calendar and make your plans to join us that evening. Also, on May 7th, that's our target date for opening the museum to the public in 2021. Again, we're going to have our safety precautions in place. You'll be needing to make reservations as we did in 2020, but we're really excited about a very good year coming up this for 2021. For those of you who weren't able to make it to the museum last year, a lot of the exhibits, especially the ones about the Mayflower and the Turning Point, will be back. So we're very excited about that and so on. So now let me talk about tonight's speaker. And just keep in mind, if you have any questions, there'll be an opportunity for you to answer questions at the end of the lecture. You please use the little button, the Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom, and you should be good. Okay, so here we go with our speaker. Writer and educator Hannah was a syndicated newspaper columnist writing for parents about education in the home. After teaching in the Lexington and Newton public schools, where her programs received special recognition from the Harvard Graduate School of Education, she turned to writing high interest stories about American history to ignite students' interest in our rich heritage. Marion Hannah Carlson won the New England Book Award and the Parents' Choice Gold Award for John Adams, the voice heard round the world. The book was followed by the Boston Landmark Orchestra's original score and narrated by Pulitzer Prize winner David McCullough on CD. Her other books include American Genius, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, Great American Writers, Yankee Doodle's Pen, and The Adventures of the Plymouth Plantation, as told by the Mayflower Mouse. Coming later this year is her new book, In Search of Great English Writers. Today, she teaches a virtual literature class to middle grade students, and post a parent-teacher blog on her website at schoolmasterpress.com. Hannah lives with her husband in Chatham and enjoys this historic region with her 3 children and 6 grandchildren, while also volunteering at the Atwood Museum, Protect Our Past, and other activities. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my privilege to introduce our speaker for this evening, Hannah Carlson.
Hello, everyone.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And thank you, Kevin, for your kind introduction. I'm excited and honored to be a small part of the Atwood Tuesday Talks. The museum is really just a treasure in our community and beyond. And a big thank you to Ellie O'Reilly, the technical wizard behind our program tonight. So we hope to warm up your Valentine week with the dramatic story of John and Abigail Adams and their love during war and peace. After the story, I've selected some of their intimate letters to read aloud to you. Now I'd like to introduce you to my colleague and friend, John Broderick, who's going to help me read some of those letters. Hello, Don.
Hello, Hannah.
Or John.
Yes, Don, as always.
Okay. You're looking handsome tonight.
Thank you. Thank you
You're
very
gonna help
much.
me read those letters?
I will indeed. Yes, ma'am. And I just like to say hello, Patriots.
Well,
Here, before we begin, though, don't forget your garden hat.
oh, yes,
All right,
thank
please.
you. Well, Abigail had so many wonderful flower gardens that she probably wore something similar to this. But if I just turn up the corners like that, then I have a hat very similar to yours. And the colonists had double duty. So I'm tricorn. I'm sorry they went out of style.
So again, welcome everybody. I'm the chair of the lecture committee, so naturally, I hope you enjoy this, or I'm in trouble.
Well, we're so happy to have Don with us, and maybe you know him through the Atwood Museum, but he's also a retired Navy pilot, a pianist, and an avid walker. So thank you very much for joining us.
My privilege.
And now we have a short survey. Would you please help us answer 2 questions? They're easy, either yes or no. They'll appear on your screen, and then you can hit the submit button. The first question is, have you ever visited the Adams National Historical Park in Quincy? Yes or no?
Oh, we're getting results. It's coming in
Okay.
good. It looks like more than, it's about 50-50.
Okay.
About 50% have been there.
Okay, that's good. Well, if your answer was yes, then you'll be able to visualize some of the places that we visit in our story tonight. If your answer was no, then I highly recommend that you take a day in Quincy. It's about 10 miles south of Boston. It's open usually May 1st through October 31st. It's so much fun. You just park your car next to the national headquarters, get a ticket, and hop on a quaint trolley that will take you around to 3 historical sites. Trust me, you'll never forget that day. So our next question, have you taken some time during this past year of quiet quarantine to read a book, to think and ponder more often, to talk more frequently with your family and friends, or to write something, a letter, a journal, or an article? Yes or no?
Oh, we have full participation here.
Oh,
That's 100%.
100%.
Yes, yes.
That's wonderful. Well, you would make good neighbors with John and Abigail. John wrote, "Let us dare to read, think, speak, and write." He was a man of his word. He practiced what he preached. John and Abigail were avid readers themselves. They had 40 trunks full of books. Abigail was in charge of constructing a library on the 2nd floor of their home in Quincy. Finally, the family built a separate library, a charming stone library right next to the house. And we'll talk more about that later. It was 2 stories high with shelves deep enough for 2 books. John said, "Always keep a poet in your pocket." So what did John and Abigail think about? Well, many things, but we know they thought about freedom, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for all Americans. And what did John and Abigail talk about? Well, we know John was a successful attorney in the courts of Boston. We know that he was a representative from Massachusetts in the Congress in Philadelphia, speaking up for freedom. We know that he spoke up as a foreign diplomat for 10 years for treaties, trade agreements, and finances for the United States. And we know that he spoke up as 2nd president for peace between France and America, and many other things. We know that Abigail spoke up for the rights of women her whole life, and she was an advocate for the free public school education of children, girls especially. So we have the extraordinary couple to think about tonight and all that they did for America. So Don and I will look forward to reading those letters to you. Okay, so let's jump right in. Where would America be without John and Abigail Adams? This is the essential chapter of the Adams story that tells of the vision and the courage in making the Declaration of Independence happen. Marked for hanging by King George III, Adams risked his life to secure independence forever for America. Aided by the strong support of his wife, Adams spoke up in the Continental Congress and in Europe with a voice heard round the world. Well, you might ask, is there a backstory to this book? Yes, briefly, there is. The story unfolded step by step with the Boston Landmark Orchestra team, aiming to bring history to life through the arts for all ages. The orchestra would perform a new symphony composed specifically for the Adams story. A richly illustrated book would go hand in hand with the music and be recorded on CDs. Live performances for Boston audiences of 15,000 would bring the story to the public on summer evenings. Let me introduce you to some of our team dedicated to this ambitious project. Charles Ansbacher founded the Boston Landmark Orchestra in 2001 as an extension of his desire to make the arts part of people's lives, regardless of their wealth and education. The orchestra performed in such historically important settings as the USS Constitution, Old North Church, Fenway Park, and other landmark locations. Since 2007, the principal home has been the Hatch Memorial Shell on the Charles River. The White House once called Ansbacher the unofficial ambassador of America's music. It was an honor when Ansbacher asked me to write the story about Adams, and after research, interviews, field trips, and editing the story, a composer was selected. Anthony DiLorenzo is an Emmy award-winning composer and trumpeter from LA. He grew up and went to school in the Boston area. We met at a sunny California cafe to talk about the vision of the new symphony. While I don't have a musical background, we agreed there would be a balance between text and musical interludes and a repeated John Adams theme. After months of revision, the symphony was finished and we needed a narrator for the recording. David McCullough is twice winner of the Pulitzer Prize, twice winner of the National Book Award, and received the Presidential Medal of Freedom. He's a host of many history programs on television, an editor, essayist, teacher, and lecturer. McCullough is a national treasure, working for decades to bring American stories to readers. It was a privilege to work with him on our recording. His reading of John Quincy Adams' words as narrator was just perfect. Others on our team are the Willard E. Smucker Foundation, the Society of the Cincinnati, the Charles Francis Adams Foundation, and they funded the production of the CD and the book, as well as its distribution to more than 600 libraries in Massachusetts. All right, well, there's several things that I think you might especially enjoy as we go through the story, and I will just mention three of them. The grand portrait of John Adams in his brown velvet coat, painted by John Singleton Copley, is displayed at the Harvard Art Museum next to a similar portrait of John Quincy Adams, his son. Also, as we go through the story, look for Adams' to-do list. This is it from his journal. After treaties of commerce, he wrote, Declaration of Independency. Just imagine if you put Declaration of Independency on your to-do list. And he probably wrote it while he was on his horse going to Philadelphia with a little journal that he could hold in the palm of his hand. Finally, I think you'd be especially interested to listen for the bells and the chimes at the end of the story, which expresses the joy and the happiness in those days. The orchestra uses a rack of chimes 7 feet high. They bring it to the concerts in a truck. Now, John Quincy Adams will tell you a story about his parents.
Hello, my fellow patriots. I'm John Quincy Adams, oldest son of Abigail and John Adams, the second president of the United States. I would like to tell you of my parents' part in winning America's independence from Great Britain. My story comes from their letters and through my eyes as a young boy.
John and Abigail exchanged more than 1,100 letters, starting with a courtship in 1762 and continuing throughout John's political career until 1801. They contain heartfelt emotion, fear for each other's safety, daily life on the farm, and many other things. They were often addressed to my dearest friend and signed, I am yours, affectionate.
You have heard of Thomas Jefferson, the author of the Declaration of Independence, and you know of General George Washington, our first president. Well, there is one man, perhaps more than any other, who argued, wrote, and spoke up to help America become a new nation. He was John Adams.
The colonists shared much in common with England, the same language, customs, literature, and family roots. Yet, in 1776, unity was ended for many. After years of taxes and lack of representatives in Parliament, 1/3 of the colonists were Tories, loyal to King George. 1/3 were the true blue, willing to fight for representation of government. And the remaining third were the timid, undecided whether to be a Tory or a rebel. Those who picked up their pitchforks and muskets to fight were ready to give their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. 4 years later, as a committee of one, Adams wrote the state constitution for Massachusetts. This was the first for any state. At age 44, Adams essentially composed the entire thing in about a month, drawing on his knowledge of political philosophy. It was a model for the USS Constitution, designed with 3 branches of government and protection of individual liberty. Today, the Massachusetts Constitution is the oldest functioning written constitution in the world.
John Adams fought not on the battlefields, but by speaking up for America's independence in Congress and overseas. In 1775, Great Britain, with the largest army and navy in the world, expects to crush Washington's army of brave farmers. Thousands leave their plows and pick up their muskets to fight against the redcoats.
King George was the dominant European power in America, Canada, India, Australia, New Zealand, Egypt, and other countries. It was his job as a king to control his vast empire, including the treasonous colonies. He ignored their petitions for reconciliation. Finally, the colonists declared their grievances against the crown, including, he has plundered our cities, ravaged our coasts, burned our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. The colonists would fight the biggest empire in the world for independence.
Father's words were often called treason. Some said he was disloyal to the king. His conscience said, "Shh, be quiet, John. The king will hang you." Who was this man who challenged the power of King George III? He was my father. Our family farm was 8 miles south of Boston in Braintree. My wise mother, Abigail, strongly supported my father. I helped with chores and study. I can remember playing in the fields with my brothers.
Adams, born on the family farm in 1735, planned to be a farmer when he grew up. One day, his father decided to show him how difficult farming could be by taking him for a long, exhausting day of cutting thatch. That night, his father asked him if he still liked farming. Yes, John insisted, even though it was very hard and very muddy. Fortunately, a good teacher helped John study hard and love books. He excelled at Harvard, became a good lawyer, and advised, always have a poet in your pocket.
As father traveled about New England as a lawyer, we kept in touch with letters. Father insisted, let us dare to read, think, speak, and write. I was 7 years old in 1775 when the war started. One of my earliest memories is climbing up nearby Penn's Hill in June to watch the Battle of Bunker Hill. Mother and I saw the smoke rising from Charlestown. Over the countrysides, the cannons boomed, louder than the muskets had at Lexington or Concord just 2 months before. That famous shot heard round the world had marked the war's beginning, April 19, 1775.
The American militia surrounded the British in Boston. They decided to tighten the siege by putting troops and 6 cannons on top of the hill in Charlestown. From there, they could fire across the harbor into Boston and at the British ships. When the British saw this, they opened fire with 128 cannons from their ships and set fire to Charlestown.
The Patriots scrambled for cover and returned the fire.
June 17th, 3,000 British soldiers made a frontal attack up the hill against the well-fortified 2,000 Patriots. The men held their fire until they could see the whites of their eyes. Twice, the redcoats were driven back. On the third attack, the Americans ran out of ammunition and retreated to Cambridge.
General Washington called a war council to help win the Indians to the Patriots' side. At his headquarters in Cambridge, Washington hosted a dinner, including chiefs and warriors of the Caughnawaga Indians in full dress. The chiefs were wondrous polite and offered their services to the Patriots.
The Caughnawaga Indians were loyal to Washington during the entire war. At a dinner party at Washington's headquarters, Washington introduced the Indians to Adams as one of the Grand Council Fire from Philadelphia. The national park maintains Washington's remarkable first headquarters, also known as the Longfellow House, once a Tory home but abandoned start of the war. And the Conewago Indians are honored today at the Smithsonian American Indian Museum in Washington.
On the long road back to Congress in Philadelphia, Father wrote a list of what needed to be done, including writing a Declaration of Independence. He was warned to be quiet, but Adams declared, "Sink or swim, live or die, survive or perish, I am with my country." Father was brave, but timed his debate carefully. He saw that Congress was divided. Most people were afraid of breaking away from Great Britain. The atmosphere was tense. Time was wasting. Father, as the leader of the True Blue, urged that a complete break was the only way for America. Had the king already sent a huge fleet across the Atlantic? Would the king hang everyone involved? Father had told us always to excel, and now it was his turn. His conscience said, "It's time. Speak up, John." Father's clear voice filled the hall with rapid reasoning. He stood in Congress and stated, "We shall be driven to the necessity of declaring ourselves independent, and treaties to be proposed to foreign powers together with a Declaration of Independence." People were beginning to listen.
What made him such a valuable leader, risking his life for the service of his country? Adams, second only to Washington, was consistent, fearless, and completely dedicated to freedom. Imagine him setting off on his horse in the middle of winter to ride almost 200 miles to Philadelphia. Once at Independence Hall, he argued for hours with independence.
Mother, who was always Father's closest advisor, longed to hear of independence. She wrote to Father about her vision of America. And by the way, in the new code of laws, I desire you remember the ladies.
Abigail was a voice for women, an advisor for her husband. Educated and intelligent, she helped John polish his speeches and letters while caring for her home, family, and village.
With Father's support, Jefferson drafted the Declaration of Independence. It was a stormy day on July 2nd, 1776, during the final debate and voting. Surprisingly, many objected to the Declaration, and no one spoke in its defense. The State House was silent, except for the rain and thunder outside. Father's conscience said, "Who will speak up, John?" Father again made his argument in a positive, reasonable way. Jefferson said he spoke with a power of thought and expression that moved us from our seats. Indeed, he was the man to whom the country is most indebted. The vote was taken. None of the 13 colonies voted against independence. Jefferson gave Father the credit for being there every hour, fighting for every word. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
The Committee of Five, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, Robert Livingston, and Roger Sherman, presented the Declaration to the full Congress. All of the 56 delegates signed.
On July 3rd, 1776, Father wrote to Mother, "My best, dearest, worthiest, wisest friend in this world, and all my children. Yesterday, the greatest question was decided, which was ever debated in America, and a greater perhaps never was or will be decided among men. A resolution was passed without one dissenting colony, that these united colonies are, and of right, ought to be free and independent states. I am apt to believe that it will be celebrated by succeeding generations as the great anniversary festival, pomp and parade with shows, games, sports, guns, bells, bonfires, and illuminations, from one end of the continent to the other, from this time forward forevermore."
Adams could contain his exuberance for the Declaration. In a letter to Abigail, he wrote, "It will be the most memorable epoch in the history of America. You will think me transported with enthusiasm, but I am not. I am well aware of the toil and blood and treasure that it will cost us to maintain this declaration and support and defend these states. Yet through all the gloom, I see the rays of ravishing light and glory. I can see that the end is more than worth the means."
When the Declaration was read aloud in Philadelphia, Father reported, the bells rang all day and almost all night. Even the chimes chimed away.
John Adams' patriotic work was only beginning. He sat on 90 congressional committees and chaired 25, including the Board of War. He gave his life to America as a son of liberty, foreign diplomat, vice president, and second president, and much more.
We hurried to Boston to hear the proclamation read for the first time. Mother described it well in her letter to Father. The troops appeared under arms, and all the inhabitants assembled. When Colonel Crafts read the proclamation, great attention was given every word. The bells rang, the privateers fired, the cannon were discharged, and every face appeared joyful. After dinner, the king's coat of arms were taken down from the State House, and every vestige of him from every place in which it appeared, and burnt in King Street. Thus ends the royal authority in this state, and all the people shall say, Amen. Through courage and hard work, John Adams' voice was heard in Braintree, Boston, Philadelphia, Paris, London, and beyond. His voice is still heard round the world. Independence forever.
Well, I hope this story warms your patriotic heart as it always does mine. It's been said where words fail, music will speak. Our mission is the combination of symphony music, a compelling story, and fine art to bring history alive for all ages. Now, let's sample some of John and Abigail's fascinating letters reflecting their close relationship and their steadfast love. Is my fellow historian Don ready?
I'm ready, Anna.
Great. Well, here's a letter from Abigail to John, December 30th, 1773, Weymouth. John and Abigail live in Boston with their 4 small children, Nabby, John Quincy, Charles, and Thomas. Abigail has gone off to visit her parents in Weymouth. Quote, "Alas, how many snowbanks divide thee and me, and warmest wishes to see thee will not melt one of them. I never left so large a flock of little ones before. My daily thoughts and nightly slumbers visit thee and thine. I feel gratified with the imagination at the close of the day in seeing the little flock around you, inquiring, when will Mama come home, as they often do for thee in thy absence. Your affectionate Abigail."
Letter from John to Abigail, July 1st, 1774, York, Maine. John is finishing up his duties as a circuit lawyer just before heading to Philadelphia to serve in the First Continental Congress. Quote, "I will not willingly see blockheads." Yes, patriots, you heard right. He said blockheads, "whom I have the right to despise, elevated above me and insolently triumphing over me. Nor shall knavery through any negligence of mine get the better of honesty, nor ignorance of knowledge, nor folly of wisdom, nor vice of virtue. I must entreat you, my dear partner, in all the joys and sorrows, prosperity and adversity of my life, to take a part with me in the struggle. I pray God for your health, entreat you to rouse your whole attention to the family, the stock, the farm, the dairy."
Abigail to John, August 19th, 1774, Braintree. John has been gone for 9 days on his long trip to Philadelphia. Quote, "The great distance between us makes the time very long to me. It seems already a month since you left. A great anxiety I feel for my country, for you, and for our family renders the day tedious and the night unpleasant. The rocks and quicksands appear on every side. The little flock remember Papa and kindly wish to see him. So does your most affectionate Abigail."
Letter from John to Abigail, August 28th, 1774, Princeton. John is nearing Philadelphia in a stagecoach, including his good friend and cousin, Samuel Adams, who is also a delegate to Congress from Massachusetts. They visited Princeton University that day. Quote, "I received your kind letter at New York, and it is not easy for you to imagine the pleasure it has given me. I am anxious for our perplexed, distressed province. I hope they will be directed into the right path. Let me entreat you, my dear, to make yourself as easy and quiet as possible. Resignation to the will of heaven is our only resource in such dangerous times. I have the strongest hopes that we shall see a clearer sky and better times. The education of our children is never out of my mind. Train them to virtue, habituate them to industry, activity, and spirit. I am with the tenderest affection and concern, your wandering John.
Letter from Abigail to John, October 16th, 1774, Braintree. After 2 months in Philadelphia, John is almost ready to return home. Quote, my much loved friend, I must not express to you at 300 miles distance how ardently I long for your return. I have some very miserly wishes and cannot consent to your spending 1 hour in town until I have had you 12. The idea plays about my heart, unnerves my hand while I write, awakens all the tender sentiments that years have increased and matured. I rejoice in the favorable account you give me of your health. May it be continued to you.
Letter from John to Abigail, May 2nd, 1775, Hartford. After visiting the battle sites of Lexington and Concord, John rides his horse to Philadelphia to serve on the Second Continental Congress. He knows there is no turning back. Quote, I am often concerned for you and the babes. Many fears and jealousies and imaginary dangers will be suggested to you, but I hope you will not be impressed by them. In case of real danger, fly to the woods with our children. Give my tenderest love to them. John.
From Abigail to John, August 29th, 1776, Boston. Abigail is spending a summer visit at her aunt's house in Boston, while John works on the war effort in Philadelphia. Quote, I wish for peace and tranquility. All my desires and all my ambitions are to be esteemed and loved by my partner, to join with him in the education and instruction of our little ones, to sit under our own vines in peace, liberty, and safety. Adieu, my dearest friend. Soon, soon return to your most affectionate.
So 19 years later, this is a letter from John to Abigail, January 1st, 1795, Philadelphia. John is in his second term as vice president and alone in Philadelphia. Abigail remains in Braintree, running the farm. Quote, my dearest friend, I wish you a happy new year and a repetition of happy new years as long as time shall endure. I hope we shall have good news from all our family, although we cannot be all together. Adieu.
From Abigail to John, January 15th, 1797, Quincy. John has just been elected president. Quote, the cold has been more severe than I can ever before recollect. It has frozen the ink in my pen and chilled the blood in my veins, but not the warmth of my affection for him, for whom my heart beats with unabated ardor through all the changes and vicissitudes of life, in the still calm of Peacefield and the turbulent scenes in which he is about to engage, the prospect of which excite neither vanity nor pride, but a mixture of anxiety and solicitude, which soften but do not swell the heart. Yours most affectionately.
Letter from John to granddaughter, Caroline Smith. Our very last letter is from John when he's in his 80s and responding to Caroline, who is Nabby's daughter. Quote, "You are not singular in your suspicions that you know but little. The longer I live, the more I read, the more patiently I think, and the more anxiously I inquire, the less I seem to know. Do justly, love mercy, walk humbly. This is enough. So questions and so answers your affectionate grandfather."
Well, written from John and Abigail's hearts, these letters hold contemporary relevance in many ways, although written more than 200 years ago. Now, if you'd like to read more of John and Abigail's letters, they're available online at the Massachusetts Historical Society and collected in many books such as My Dearest Friend. John Adams, the lavish 7-part miniseries in 2008, chronicles the life of the Adams family from the Boston Massacre until 1770, through the years of war and peace to their final days at Peacefield. This highly popular HBO series stars Paul Giamatti and Laura Linney and is still available today. The movie is based on David McCullough's Pulitzer Prize winning biography. He was on site to help guide the accuracy of the production. So after decades of service to America at home and abroad, John and Abigail moved back to Quincy to a retirement homestead in 1788. Yet, a life of farming like Washington desired was not to be when John was elected vice president in 1789 for 8 years, followed by serving as the second president of the United States. Finally, in 1801, he could return to Peacefield to read, think, speak, and write when he wasn't farming. You can still see the beautiful lilac bushes that Abigail planted so many years ago and enjoy summer flower gardens around the house, and the little stone library on the left has a lot of vines on it in this picture. But today, you'll find this medieval style stone library filled with more than 12,000 volumes in 12 different languages, cared for by the National Park Service for endless years to come. Note the desk in the far back where John wrote the Massachusetts Constitution. The Boston Landmark's free for all concerts are Wednesday nights at the Memorial Hat Show in July and August. Bring a lawn chair, watch the sunset over the Charles River, and enjoy some wonderful classical music on a summer night. We have an amazing tapestry of history deep in our culture. Find a child, a grandchild, a neighbor, and share the story of John and Abigail. Your interest in American history will ignite their love of our rich heritage, and someday they'll share these stories with their children. If you reach and teach a child, you'll help to preserve what John and Abigail and thousands of others lived and died for: independence forever. So a big huzzah, huzzah for the true blue patriots. So we hope that you've enjoyed this story tonight and it brought some joy to your home and warmed your hearts. As you can tell, I'm passionate about John and Abigail's story and never get tired of hearing it. It's been shared from Boston to Indiana to California as a beloved, vital American saga. So if you want to discuss this patriotic couple or history, or if you think of any questions after this program, you can get in touch with me anytime and we can have more conversations about it. But now I'm happy to try to answer any of your questions, either now or later.
Huzzah, Hannah.
Thank you very much, Hannah. That was a wonderful lecture. Thank you both to you and Don for your the letters that you read. So if anyone has a question to ask Hannah, please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen to post your question, and then Hannah will answer them as they come in. While we wait for some of the questions to come in, if you are interested in getting a signed copy of the book, John Adams, A Voice Heard Round the World, they are available exclusively at Chatham's Yellow Umbrella, Where the Sidewalk Ends, our own humble home here at the Atwood Museum in our gift shop, or from Schoolmaster Press. The book is also available at Amazon.com. Amazon. So let's just see if we have any questions. I got a question here. Hold on, a couple of them are coming in. Okay, how did you first become interested in John Adams and his story?
Well, I was first interested because Charles Ansbacher asked me to write the story to go with the symphony. And I realized that we do have relatives connected with the John Adams family. So we already had all the books in our house and I could dive in right away. But I've always loved history and read David McCullough's book on John Adams. And so this was to gear it a little bit differently for all audiences with incorporation of symphony music and fine art. So I'm still interested in John and Abigail Adams and their remarkable story. And it's not something that you learn and then go on to somebody else, but you keep on learning. And it's been a great joy.
Okay, here's another question, Hannah, from Grace Yeager. Was Abigail with John in Washington when he was the president?
Can you repeat that?
Yes, was Abigail with John in Washington when he was president?
Well, Abigail had a family and a farm to take care of, so she was back and forth, but she was there when they moved into the White House. They were the first occupants of the White House. And you get a pretty good idea of what that was like when you see the John Adams HBO series. It was pretty rugged then, but she was a devoted wife and she followed John as much as she could. She had a large family to take care of back in Quincy.
All right, so the next question I have is from Pam Morgan. What percentage of women were literate in the late 1700s?
No, I can't give you a number, but free public education had not been established for girls. And so that was one of the things that Abigail was a big advocate for. But her home was rich with literature, and she was basically homeschooled and she enjoyed learning on her own. She was very smart. And so, yeah, it's sort of like today. You can do a lot of learning on your own, homeschooling, talking to people, hearing stories from your family. So in the formal style that we know of public education in the colonial days, they didn't have that exactly.
Thank you very much. This question comes from John Tibbetts. What was Abigail's influence on her female contemporaries?
She was a role model of benevolence and love and care. She took care of her in-laws, her children, the community. She was a superwoman, and I'm sure a shining example to the colonial women. So a beautiful combination of what needed to be done and also taking time to learn and study and write. to a difficult balance.
Nice. Here's a comment from Maria, or Marie, I think it is, from HBO featured the John Adams miniseries yesterday in honor of President's Day. She watched it, and again, it was wonderful, but she also felt that the McCullough book was superb. So she just wanted to share that with the group. And she also said thank you. So I'm assuming she enjoyed the lecture this evening. Another one from anonymous attendee. John and Thomas Jefferson reestablished their friendship, but what caused the rift between them?
Well, I think there were many reasons. There was a Supreme Court case going on, which they thought differently about. There was the competition to be second president. And often with a very close relationship, there are hurt feelings and mistakes. But that lasted about 10 years. And then they did start their correspondence together when they were both retired in Quincy and Monticello.
All right, excellent. Last question I have for you this evening, Hannah, is what was it like working with David McCullough?
Well, I wouldn't be exaggerating if I said it was one of the highlights of my life. He's just so wonderful and warm and knowledgeable. I'll give you one example. When we were going to do the recording of the John Adams book, I was on Martha's Vineyard having my lunch, and he called me up on the phone. And he said, Mrs. Carlson, I'm so looking forward to recording your book, but I have one problem. And I said, well, what is that? He said, I can't read that King George was the biggest bully in the world. And I said, okay. And then when we got to the studio, I asked him, do you think you could say he was a bully? And he said, he thought for a moment, then he said, no. He said he was a king and he was doing his job. And so if you look at the text in the book while you're listening to the CD, you'll notice that one little phrase is not there, but it taught me as a writer to look at all sides of a character and see how they would view things. But anyways, he's been a wonderful support and really kicked off my writing career when I asked him, well, writing for young people, did a lot of writing before that. But I asked him if he would write the biography of Henry Longfellow, because we were doing the 200th anniversary of Longfellow's birth. And he said, no, I can't write it, but I think you should write it. And you should write a play as well, because once you're in a play, you'll never forget it. So I did both. So he's been a mentor and support and friend. And I'm very, very grateful for that.
Wow, that's very cool. Thank you so much, Hannah, for your passion and for spending this evening with us. And thank you to everyone who came to our lecture. Hope to see you in our next lecture on March 9th with Ted Keown. And have a great evening. Take care.
Bye, everybody.